You can't sleep in the house anymore. It's not your home. I was standing there, barefoot on the deck, holding my old hoodie and a thin blanket. It was mid-October, and the night air was already biting. My cousin Jenna's voice rang out behind me, as casually cruel as ever. The porch light buzzed above my head, casting harsh yellow across the backyard I used to mow every Saturday morning. I didn't say anything. I just blinked slowly and looked at her, at all of them. Her husband, Mike, with his arms crossed like a bouncer at a bar, and her mother, Aunt Ruth, peeking from the kitchen window like I was some stray dog they'd just thrown scraps to. They had all made the decision. Pack my things into 2 black trash bags and toss them out like I was furniture they no longer had room for. Just for a few nights, Jenna added, pretending this wasn't permanent. Until you figure something out. Funny. I was supposed to be helping them. Helping with Grandma's estate. Helping after her funeral. Helping with the house. Now I was the one exiled. Sleeping outside in a backyard I once treated like sacred ground. My name is Danielle Brooks, and I was 27 when this happened. After my mom passed away from breast cancer when I was 19, I moved in with my grandmother, Mabel Johnson, in her quiet little ranch house in upstate New York. She didn't say much when I arrived with one suitcase and swollen eyes, just handed me a glass of sweet tea and said, "You'll be all right, honey. You're home now." And I was. For 8 years, I was more than just her granddaughter. I was her shadow, her caregiver, her company. I took night classes in accounting, worked part-time at the local library, and spent my evenings learning her recipes, listening to her stories, and doing crossword puzzles with her on the porch swing. That backyard? The one they made me sleep in? I helped plant every rose bush, every herb. The oak tree with the wind chime, that was our Sunday project one summer. I used to climb up that tree when I was a kid. I carved my initials into it with a spoon. Grandma Mabel wasn't rich, but she was generous. She didn't trust many people, especially not her daughter Ruth or her niece Jenna, who only showed up when they wanted something. Still, she loved them the best she could. But she loved me with her whole heart, and I loved her the same way. When her health began to decline last year, I moved back in full-time. Quit my job, turned down an internship in the city. I bathed her, fed her, stayed up with her during the worst nights. Ruth and Jenna didn't visit once. Not once. Then Grandma died. The funeral was small and quiet, just the way she wanted. Jenna cried loud enough for everyone, but her crocodile tears dried up as soon as the will was mentioned. And suddenly I was no longer family. I was just the girl who stayed too long. The house was theirs, they said. Ruth claimed that Grandma verbally promised it to her side of the family. I didn't argue.
Not yet.
I just packed quietly. Or rather, they packed for me. As I stood there in the dark, feeling like a ghost haunting my own memories, I remembered something Grandma once whispered to me. They're gonna come for what's mine. But don't worry, I already handled it. 2 days after they made me sleep outside, I asked Jenna if I could grab the last of my things from Grandma's room. She sighed dramatically.
Fine.
But be quick. We're repainting tomorrow. I walked into the room like I was visiting a grave. The smell of lavender oil still lingered. Her blue Afghan blanket was gone, probably stuffed into a donation bag. But I didn't come for keepsakes. I came for the folder she told me about. It was taped beneath the bottom drawer of her nightstand, exactly where she said it would be. I peeled it off and held it in my hands for a long minute. Inside was the deed, not to the house, that had gone through a trust Grandma set up years ago. This was the backyard. Legally surveyed, fenced separately, gifted specifically to me, signed, and notarized. She had separated the backyard from the rest of the property and filed the title under my name 6 months before she passed. There was also a letter in her handwriting. This was your sanctuary, Danny. Let it be your freedom, too. You always belonged here more than any of them. I walked back outside, past Jenna's loud phone call on speaker, and stood on the patch of grass near the oak tree. Then I called my lawyer. 3 days later, Ruth showed up while I was planting basil in my backyard garden. She stood at the edge of the property line, arms folded, lips pressed thin. "What are you doing, Danielle?" I didn't look up right away. Prepping the soil, I said. It's good for basil this time of year. You don't live here anymore. I straightened slowly and dusted my hands off on my jeans. Actually, I do. Legally. Jenna appeared behind her like some bad omen in yoga pants. You're trespassing. We can call the cops. I smiled and pulled the envelope from my back pocket. You might want to take a look at this before you do. Ruth snatched it, eyes scanning the legal jargon. Jenna leaned in, her jaw tightening as the reality started to dawn. You're kidding me, she said, her voice rising. This is a joke. No joke. Grandma deeded the backyard and a 6-foot buffer around it to me. It's registered with the county. Has its own parcel number. You'd know that if you ever paid attention to more than your fake crying. Ruth shoved the papers back at me like they burned her. She was sick when she did this. Confused. Manipulated. Don't go there, I said, my voice flat but heavy. You ignored her for years. She made a choice. And now you get to live with it. That's when the real manipulation started. Danielle, honey, Ruth said, voice sugar-drenched and rotten, we're family. This land, this home, it's meant to stay in the bloodline. So, I'm not family now? I asked. Funny, I don't remember being in the bloodline when you tossed me and my things on the curb last week. Jenna chimed in, hands on her hips. You always played the victim. Just like your mom. Grandma pitted you. My stomach nodded, but I didn't flinch. Don't talk about my mother. Ruth softened again. Look, let's just forget this deed. We'll make it worth your while. I don't want your hush money. What do you want then? She snapped. I want you to respect boundaries. Starting with this fence I'll be putting up next week. They both gasped. You can't just build a wall in the middle of the property. It's not the middle. It's the edge. And yes, I can. That's when David stepped out from the side porch, Ruth's son. My cousin. Quiet, nerdy, always hiding behind a camera lens. Danielle, he said softly. Is it true? Grandma gave it to you. I nodded. I remember her talking about it last year. She was proud of it. Said she was giving you a piece of peace. Ruth whipped around. David, stay out of this.
No, Mom.
I'm not going to keep pretending this is okay. Danielle was here. You weren't. She earned this. Jenna scoffed. You're such a traitor. But the cracks were already showing. I could see the panic behind Ruth's eyes, the dawning horror that the girl she thought she could erase from the family narrative now legally owned the space where her grandkids played, where family barbecues used to happen. I'm building a tiny house, I added casually, with a gate. Solar-powered. Off-grid. City-approved. You're insane, Ruth shouted. No, I said, calm as a still lake. I'm home. They stormed off, throwing threats over their shoulders. Lawsuits. Contests. Family curses. But I just kept planting. David stayed behind, kneeling beside me. She'd be proud of you, he whispered. I looked toward the oak tree. I know. Over the next few weeks, the backyard transformed into a sanctuary. I hired a contractor named Ethan, a friend of David's, to start laying the foundation for the tiny house. Every day, I watched concrete set and would rise while sipping coffee in a foldable chair, the same one Grandma used during Sunday devotions. Neighbors walked by, curious, sometimes concerned. Isn't this the Petersons' place? One older man asked. Part of it still is, I said. But this corner here? That's mine now.
Rumors spread.
Some praised the audacity. Others clutched pearls over family matters being aired in public. But I kept going. One day, as I was organizing pots of lavender and rosemary on the porch to be, Lisa, Jenna's former best friend, stopped by with a mason jar of sun tea. I heard what happened, she said quietly. I just wanted to say, you did what most of us only dream of. She sat down beside me on a hay bale and looked around. Jenna's been toxic since high school. We used to talk about it in whispers. I always envied your courage. I smiled gently. Toxic people don't like boundaries. That doesn't mean we shouldn't build them. Her eyes welled up. She's been guilt-tripping me for years. I finally told her I needed space. Blocked her number last week. I passed her a slice of banana bread. Welcome to your first step of peace. It was a subtle moment, but I realized something important. My story wasn't just mine. It was a spark, a signal to other women, especially women, that boundaries weren't betrayals. They were necessary repairs. That weekend, Ruth sent an official-looking letter, a last-ditch attempt to renegotiate the deed. She wanted to purchase the backyard back from me for pennies on the dollar. I didn't even open it. Instead, I typed up a clean, respectful response. Dear Ruth, I have no intention of selling. I've created something meaningful here, but I'm open to discussing rental access if needed, at market rates. Respectfully,
Danielle.
I printed it, signed it, and delivered it by hand. Jenna answered the door. She took one look at the envelope and rolled her eyes. You're still dragging this out? No, I said softly. I'm just choosing not to fight. There's a difference. Her scoff echoed as she shut the door. But even that didn't rattle me anymore. The truth is, I wasn't doing any of this against them. I was doing it for me. Later that month, I hosted my first small backyard dinner, a healing circle of sorts. David, Lisa, and 3 other neighbors came. We shared cornbread, laughter, and stories about Grandma. David brought old photos she had taken with a Polaroid. In one of them, I was sitting on her lap, pointing to a birdhouse we'd painted together. You'll own this yard someday, she told me. I murmured, running my finger over the image. I thought she was joking. She never joked about land, David chuckled. She knew. After dessert, Lisa took a deep breath. Danielle, thank you for showing me that walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. I raised my glass. To freedom. And fences. The good kind. We all laughed. Not the bitter laugh of vengeance, but the kind that feels like spring air in your lungs. For the first time in years, I slept without clenching my jaw. I hadn't just reclaimed a backyard. I had reclaimed myself. 6 months later, the tiny house was complete. It had a cedarwood porch, hand-painted shutters, and a vegetable garden that bloomed with wild purpose. Cherry tomatoes, mint, and Grandma's favorite, okra. I named it Haven House. The Petersons still lived in the main building, but the tension had mellowed. Not because things had been forgotten, but because I had stopped participating in their drama. One quiet morning in March, I stepped out with a cup of chamomile tea and heard the crunch of gravel behind me. It was Ruth. She stood awkwardly at the edge of my garden, arms crossed, eyes darting. Time had humbled her, or maybe just worn her out. I came to say, you were right, she said flatly. About the will. About Jenna.
About me.
I didn't move.
Didn't speak.
I just let the breeze carry her words to me. I thought controlling everything would make me feel safe. But I only ended up alienating everyone. She looked at my porch, at the wind chimes, the fresh coat of yellow paint, the hummingbirds flirting with the hibiscus. You did something beautiful here, Danielle. I nodded. I did it for Grandma, but also for myself. A pause. Then Ruth added, I started therapy. Not because of you, but maybe because you reminded me I needed it. That was enough. I didn't forgive her in that moment. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. But I felt a door open, one she could choose to walk through, or not. She left quietly, and I went back to watering the marigolds. 2 weeks later, Lisa launched a wellness pop-up using the backyard for monthly gatherings. David offered to run yoga sessions. Even a former coworker of Jenna's, a woman I barely knew, stopped by with a handwritten note. Your story gave me the courage to leave a 10-year toxic marriage. Thank you. I never thought my pain would ripple outward into power for others. But Grandma always said, when you plant seeds of truth, the harvest may surprise you. Inside Haven House, I kept one of Grandma's old recipes, peach cobbler with cinnamon crust, pinned above the stove. I made it for every guest. Not because it was fancy, but because it tasted like home. One evening, as the sun dipped low, David sat on the porch swing, strumming a worn guitar. Lisa was sipping tea, and a kid from down the street ran through the garden chasing fireflies. I looked around and realized something. I didn't just own the backyard. I had built a legacy of boundaries, healing, and joy. And as the wind rustled through the wind chimes, the ones Grandma had hung decades ago, I heard her voice in my memory, clear as ever. Darlin', the world will try to evict you from your worth. But never forget, peace is your property. And this time I smiled, because I finally believed it.